In this episode, we're going to add cursor targeting to finally close the loop so that you can not only select actions, you can finally pick targets for them. There's about 170-ish lines of code in this episode, but once we're done with this, we can very easily start adding loads of cool stuff as the foundation is fundamentally done. So hang in there and let's crack on. Before we get started though, we need to implement a quick fix to a mistake we made in episode 7. We accidentally placed the for loop that merges our submenus into the top level menu inside the for loop that interprets the action list. Given they both use I for their iterator, this can cause all sorts of problems. You might have noticed crashes if you try to add more than 2 actions to your characters, so just move this block of code outside of the for loop, putting it just before our actual menu call. Sorry about that, mistakes do happen, especially when at first glance the code appears to work just fine. Anyway, with that out of the way, let's make our targeting cursor. We're going to be using the same cursor sprite that we use for the menus, the little hand with an offset origin point. Rather than make an object for the cursor, we're going to use a struct inside OBattle to manage its properties. So in OBattle's create event, I'm going to make the following struct. Active user and action will contain the user and action for whatever we've selected from the menu. Target will be determined by the cursor itself. Target side will tell us if we're targeting the player side or the enemy side of the fight. Index will tell us which specific member of the appropriate unit array we should be looking at, and target all will tell us if we should actually target the entire array in case we're using an area of effect attack or something. Confirm delay is used to make sure we don't accidentally set our target with the same key press that we used to pick our action, and active simply turns the cursor on and off. Next up, we'll head over to the menu function script and make some modifications to menu select action. Rather than simply starting the selected action with a target of ourselves, we need to activate the targeting cursor if it is needed. So if the action requires a target, as defined in our game data, we can then do with cursor. You can use a with statement on a struct the same way you use it on an object. Inside this block, we can directly access all of those struct variables we just defined, which mostly saves us some typing. So to turn the cursor on, we set active to be true, active action to be the action we selected from the menu, and target all to be the same as target all as defined for that action. If it's an action that we want to toggle between all and single target modes, we'll start off in all mode by default. Then we set active user to be the user of the action as appropriate. Next, we need to establish the default side to target. You'll want damaging abilities to default to aiming at the enemy, and healing spells, etc. to aim at your party by default. So we'll check the action setting for this, and for enemies, we can set target index to 0, target side to obattle.enemy units, and then our active target to the result of those two things. If we want to target the party, I find it works best and is most expected for the ability to target the user of the action by default. So target side becomes party units, active target becomes the active user. However, we also need to find the index of the user in the party array. We need this so the cursor knows what position it is at in the list and where to move next when you press up or down. Thankfully, we can do this quite easily by using arrayFindIndex using a custom function that will return the index of the array where the value matches the active target, which we just set to be our current user. This can be a little confusing, so to explain again, this function takes each entry or element of the array in turn and will return true if it matches the current user. ArrayFindIndex will return the index of the element that returns true. So in short, target index will point correctly at whichever unit selected this action. Of course, if there is no target needed for the action, we can do what we were doing before. Just begin the action directly with a target of -1 since we don't need one, and then destroy the menu. The game loop will then progress as normal. Okay, so now we've activated the cursor, we need to be able to move it between our possible targets and select one, as well as be able to toggle selecting all of one side or single target mode. So let's head over to OBattle step event where previously we simply ran battle state. It's possible you'll want cursor control available in other states, so we'll make this universally available in OBattle step event and write the cursor control section here. First we check if the cursor is active, and if it is, we use a with statement again and gather some inputs. Once again, this is a quick way of doing direct inputs, and you might want to refer to your own input gathering system here. Up, down, left, right are fairly self-explanatory. Key toggle will be used to shift us between single and multi-target mode, and confirm and cancel will confirm or cancel, either beginning the action or returning us to the action menu. You'll notice we set these all to false before incrementing our confirm delay value and then checking to see if it is above some arbitrary frame count. I've gone for 1, so only after 2 frames have passed with the cursor active do we actually test these inputs. This just stops stops us triggering the target confirmation with the same button press we used to pick an action. Next, we work out any horizontal or vertical movement necessary for the cursor. Horizontal movement will swap which side we target, vertical will swap which unit we target. Swapping sides is pretty easy. We'll keep it simple and not bother wrapping around, so if you press left you'll target players, and if you press right you'll target enemies. We set target side to point at the whole array of units for whichever side we need. For player actions, I'm going to assume you don't want to be able to target dead enemies, especially since we make them invisible at the moment. If you don't want that though, you can skip this little block where I use array filter to swap the enemy units array in target side for a copy that only contains enemies with above 0 HP. Now let's move between targets individually. We only need to do this if we're in single target mode. If we are, then we'll increase or decrease target index depending on our input. Then we'll wrap around if needed by going to the final index if we drop below index 0, or going to index 0 if we go above the final index. You can also cap this if you prefer rather than wrap, but you need to do something to prevent the index going out of range one way or another. You'll get errors if you try to target index -1 or an index higher than the array length. Now we have the target index, we identify the unit that is at this index in our target side array and make that the currently active target. The only other thing to do is swap to all mode if we press the shift key and our action allows us to do so. So if target all in the action definition is mode.varies and we press the toggle key, set target all in the cursor to true. That's single target mode. If we're in target all mode, we simply set active target to point at the whole array being pointed at by target side, which in this case of enemies will still exclude any dead enemies. We also include the same toggle to swap back to single target mode if the action allows it. That's targeting itself done. Now we just need to confirm or cancel the action. If we press the confirm key, we can begin the action in O battle and we can destroy the menu instance just like before. We can then make the cursor inactive and set confirm delay to 0. If we press cancel, and I also check to see we haven't pressed confirm just to prevent both blocks of code potentially going off at once, we set our menu instance to be active again. We then once again make the cursor inactive and set confirm delay to 0. That's the whole logic of our cursor, so well done on making it to here. We're probably through all of the most complex code in this series, so you can relax a little bit, as going forward things will likely be a bit more straightforward. We're not done with the cursor just yet though, we still need to actually draw it, so let's pop over to OBattle's draw event. Right at the bottom we'll draw the cursor. We check if it's active, and if it is, we with the cursor once again. Assuming we have an active target, we check to see if that target is an array or not, which quickly tells us if we're in all mode or not. If we are not, we just draw the pointer sprite at our active targets X and Y. The origin point of the pointer sprite will cleanly offset it from the target appropriately. If it is an array, we need to draw lots of pointers. I'll also create a kind of pulsing fade effect so you can clearly see you're in a special mode of some kind. I'll do that by setting alpha to be the sign of get timer divided by 50,000 plus 1. Without going into the maths, this just means we'll fade between 0 and 2 alpha every half a second or so, resulting in a pulsing blink effect. Then we'll use a for loop to go over each member of active target, and for each one draw a pointer sprite in the same way as we did for the single target mode. When we're done, remember to set our draw alpha back to 1, very important, and then close all of our code blocks. Before running the game, just to test things out, I'm going to set our ice spell to have a variable target mode so we can swap between single and all targeting. You might also want to test an ability that doesn't target enemies by default, though we will add plenty more actions later. If we run the game, you'll hopefully find that finally you can target your abilities. If you use the ice spell, you'll also see we can target all of one side at once. However, on cast you will notice that despite playing the effect on all targets, only one target gets hit. That's because the action is still set up very simply to only deal damage to the first member of the array, assuming it is a single target only ability. We'll cover this later. Spoiler, you just put a for loop here and go over all the targets. This also works for single target spells fine. You should do it for everything, really. We only didn't do it to keep things simple. But until then, you can relax a little and know that if you've gotten to this point, there's now tons of things you can add very easily to the game. We can create whatever actions we want to do pretty much whatever we want. We can put them in submenus, target them, have them deal damage, heal damage, be an AoE spell, single target spell, or anything else. We'll cover how to add a variety of typical things like this in the next episode, but it gets a lot more fun from this point in my opinion, so I hope you're looking forward to it. I hope it hasn't been too hard to follow up to this point. This is the most advanced series I've ever written, I think, and I've had to keep explanations relatively brief and editing relatively simple. Let me know what you think so far below. Either way, I hope you enjoyed this one. Thank you to my patrons for funding this series. It would not exist without them. If you want to support more tutorials like this and support the development of my game Pokepoke, please consider supporting me on Patreon, or at the very least liking, subscribing, all that good YouTube stuff. Thanks for watching till the end, that helps me a lot too. I'll catch you all next time.